Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February, 11th Accelerant Research Virtual Insights Conference. My name is Bill McDowell. I am the president at Accelerant Research, and I'm going to be your host for today's festivities, as it were. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because my voice may be a little in and out. I've been under the weather last week, but you all get to benefit from my cool, smooth R&B radio DJ voice that may kind of go in and out and fade into 13-year-old prepubescent cracking. There's no telling what may happen. So welcome everybody. If you've never attended one of our webinars or virtual conferences in the past, welcome. If you have attended before, welcome back. Appreciate it. If you have attended before, you probably know kind of the spiel that we tend to give at the beginning of these events, these webinars, and this is our ground rules that we operate by. We started doing these webinars back in COVID times, actually during quarantine, and we were really big on these rules because nobody really knew what we were doing. This whole Zoom thing was brand new. These are typically not things that we have to deal with too much, but you never know, right? So we are at the mercy of tech. If something did crap out, if our stream went out, we're going to apologize. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Be respectful is our other rule to live by, and that is really just to one another. To me as a presenter, you can say what you will. I'm okay with that. But no, I want you all to network, engage, interact with one another. To the extent possible, this is not an in-person conference. Obviously, this is a digital virtual one. But if you can, get on the socials, start interacting with one another, use the hashtag ARVIC. Or if you are in the Zoom or YouTube, why don't you take advantage of the chat function, the Q&A, drop questions, drop comments. That's kind of what we're here for. I would love nothing more than to see a lot of chatter and offshoot conversations even. If you're at an in-person conference, it's kind of rude to have sidebar conversations for something like this. Yeah, go for it. Why not? It's totally fine. I think what we're going to be talking about is hot off the presses, Super Bowl ads and some of the information that we've been seeing. So if y'all want to debate with one another, talk with one another, please feel free. Before we start getting into our content, what I would like to do is just kind of give the heads up. I mentioned we do a lot of these virtual conferences, webinars. Got a couple of events coming up, one of which is going to be later this month on the 27th of February. Brett from my team, as well as Pavel from Amazon, are going to be getting together, having one of these mini conferences, just similar format to today. They're going to be talking about transforming insights into results, advancing influence in corporate landscapes from the bottom up, which is a really good and kind of, the intent of, what we do is wanting to basically rise the tide, as it were, for researchers and insights professionals. We want to be basically learning with one another. So let's use these opportunities. We want to be sharing and knowledge sharing, as it were, right? Coming up in March, March 27th is going to be one of our more, we'll call it traditional, but original format, all-day virtual insights conferences. And what those tend to be is just kind of just back-to-back webinars over the course of the day. We bring in some really compelling speakers who are going to talk about lots of different topics within research and impacting of and by research. And then next one is going to be March 27th, like I say. And if you want to sign up for any of these upcoming webinars, upcoming events, just go to our website, accelerantresearch.com, and you'll click on the resources drop down, conferences, and you'll have all the info about upcoming agendas, rosters, and you can go ahead and register and sign up for the conferences. All right, so today's conference, myself, I will be presenting on Creative Testing for Ad Effectiveness Super Bowl Edition. And as we all know, Super Bowl was a couple of days ago, so we got a lot of hot off the presses information, results. The idea is we want to just basically share a framework of creative asset testing, right? So if you're going to be doing ad testing, over time, this is a framework that you can use. This is best practices that we have seen at Accelerant Research. I think I want to definitely in the spirit of our conversation, not always the right recipe for all particular corporations, for particular researchers, but that's the whole idea of this. Float some ideas, share some interesting content, and maybe we can all learn a little something, right? Before we get going, I would definitely, like I said, just kind of encourage everyone. So we're talking about Super Bowl ads, right? So if you have your favorites, if you have particular ones that you were interested in, like I say, jump in the chat, jump in the Q&A, share. Tell me about what you thought, any opinions about who did it well, who didn't do it well this past Super Bowl. As we know, almost everybody watched, so this is obviously compelling and fresh content. Okay, so and kind of also in that spirit or in that vein, we're we've tested a bunch of Super Bowl ads, right? The Super Bowl aired on Sunday. We at Accelerant Research have tested, I believe, 45, 50 of the ads that did air. We run them through a 250 person, just about 5 to 8 minute survey for each of the ads that were tested. So I think that translates to 50, 60 ads, over 12,000 survey completes that we conducted. So huge shout out to my team at Accelerant because within a couple of days, that's a pretty Herculean effort to be able to field a bunch of surveys, analyze a bunch of data, and put together some results so I can talk about them today. So what I'm showing right now is just conceptual framework for conducting ad testing or communications research. And I like to really boil that down to just questions. All right. So, what are you looking to glean from this research or this research program? What do you want an ad to say? How should you say it? Where to say it? How well did it work? And typically, internal marketing agency business partners, these are folks that can kind of glom onto pretty simple questions like these, right? Depending on what your objectives are, depending on which of these questions you need answered when you are looking to do communications research, the type of research that's going to align to that can vary quite a bit. So you can have qualitative or quantitative solutions that can basically be used to answer each of these questions, right? So if we are at initial creative brief stage of research, just trying to understand what should we build or what should we include in our marketing campaign, well, that's going to be an early on kind of phase one of just understanding what to say. How, what are the emotional, functional, communication levers that we should even be pulling in this advertising that is just beginning to take shape. So very front of pipeline, trying to understand, what to test. Focus of what we're going to be looking at today is going to be primarily down here at the bottom, and that's just going to be evaluation research. So an ad has been created, and now you want to test that thing, and you want to understand how well that thing performs, either before or after having actually released it to market, right? Um, Before we jump into results, I just want to give the very brief sort of timeshare pitch of the webinar. No, Agora USA. So Accelerant, we have our own panel. Our panel is actually among the largest in the business when it comes to proprietary panels. Um, we are very proud of the level of quality that we have in our panel. Our panel is basically the lifeblood and the raw material for any research that we conduct, either qualitative or quantitative. And it's the source for which we gather these insights that we're going to be talking about today. Um, Second to none, I recommend it. It's one of the best in the biz. Quality, as anybody who's been in research, especially for the past several years, knows has become a huge issue in our business and one that we take very seriously, and ultimately looking to take that raw material of just the people taking part in research and deliver it and produce great insights based on it, right? Okay. Before we jump in, we actually conducted a little bit of having nothing to do with the ads themselves, particularly, we like to do every year a pre and a post Super Bowl pregame and post-game survey. And some of the interesting findings, again, these are kind of hot off the presses, but this year versus years prior. So we look at pregame, postgame. So what were people, consumers, excited about for the big game from the pregame standpoint, and what did they like best about the game afterward, right? So the game itself, no real surprises here. It was a bit of a yawner. So folks were more excited about the game going into it, less so coming out. Halftime show, even in spite of some of the kind of social murmurings that have been going on afterward, halftime show was fairly anticipated and kind of delivered from that standpoint. The ads themselves, a little bit of a dip, but if I look at actually last year's results, and that's what I'm flashing right now, the game much more compelling. The ads themselves kind of disappointed last year. If we go back to this year, fairly flat and even. And then we've got this other response, which better post game. Don't actually have an open end associated with that, but I can assume that can only be like Taylor Swift, right? It has to be. Post game results. Another interesting finding, and this is kind of to underscore a lot of what we need to always keep in mind as researchers, and especially kind of the subject matter that we're delivering, is that consumers, at the end of the day, and those are the folks that we're trying to measure and understand and find out what makes them tick so that we can deliver better ads, in this case, better products, better experiences. They're irrational and kind of crazy. So, it's important that as researchers, we understand that and bring that context into whatever it is that we're doing. And this is kind of from our pre-post game survey, little fun fact that's always interesting to kind of underscore this, right? People are crazy. So if we ask people before the Super Bowl who they're pulling for, got a pretty even split between Chiefs fans and Eagles fans. If we ask basically a demographically identical group of people after the game, who were you pulling for? Now, you would expect for these to be even Steven, right? But everybody loves a winner, and far fewer people, in fact, 20 points fewer people, are willing to admit that they were pulling for the Chiefs going into the game. Again, fun fact, just kind of underscores the fact that consumers are irrational, they do crazy things, but it keeps us employed as researchers because we're always chasing that consumer mindset, as it were, right? All right, so I got a little poll here. If you are in the Zoom, please answer. If you are in YouTube, you can definitely feel free to just drop in the chat. But all right, so we all watched the Super Bowl. What do we think? Among these, who do we think was the winning Super Bowl ad, right? And this is in the minds of consumers. What did they think? All right, just launched a poll. Please feel free to answer. Got some answers coming in. All right, and we'll revisit that as we go through. So evaluating creative, right? So, we're going to be sharing a lot of examples throughout this presentation of just, different ads from the Super Bowl. So we're going to be sharing actual data from surveys that we conducted. But this is a sort of recipe and framework that we've developed for assessing or testing ads. And it boils down to a handful of survey metrics. So we start, top of funnel by, just fielding a survey, asking folks, all right, so exposing them to an ad, in this case, a Super Bowl TV spot. But this is very interchangeable for basically any type of media. This can be done for digital, this can be done for print, social, you name it. But in this case, the examples that we're going to be drawing from is going to be your Super Bowl TV spots. But we start with, top of funnel brand recall, right? Does the ad, create that association with the brand that was intended. Likability, to what extent did folks like or dislike? And these are survey ratings, with the exception of brand recall, 5-point scale, pretty simple survey ratings. Engagement, to what extent would folks actually, sit through and watch this ad? Viral potential, and that's the degree to which they might or would expect to share it on their socials. Consideration, how likely would you be to consider this brand or thing if it were available to you? Intent, likelihood to actually take action and either purchase or use the thing. And then a few more evaluative measures here. We've got likelihood to recommend, finding the content relevant, and comparison to other brands. We like to show in this sort of one-pager scorecard, the comparison, right? So I'm going to kind of break down, the component parts of this scorecard or these norms, as it were. So, all right, this is what the scorecard typically looks like. We've got scores, we've got some thumbs ups and downs, which I'll talk through, and we got a little bit of a video playback, call it a dial testing measure, right? All right, so top of the funnel scores. That's, these top measures right here. So these are your evaluative ratings that are most influenced by the given bit of creative that we're assessing, right? So again, the brand recall, the likability, engagement, viral potential. These are the things that are highly impacted by the creative asset that is being tested right then and there. When you get down to the bottom of the funnel, and I will say before that even, so recall, does the brand associate with the ad? That's your table stakes, right? If you are an ad that is, through the roof in terms of how it's scoring, if folks are not making that association, then that is potentially a problem. The bottom of the funnel metrics, right? So this is your consideration, your intent, likely to recommend, relevance, and comparison to other brands. These are much more difficult for a given piece of creative to move the needle on, right? And these are going to be more subject to, an overall brand's impressions or likelihood to use or easier or difficult of signing up or long purchase cycles. These are the things that, for a given creative test, you may not see a whole lot of movement with, right? I mean, it is certainly the desire that you put an ad out there and it instantly, elicits a response to go out and purchase the thing that you're advertising, but, that's a tall order, right? I will say that, so we're showing finished ads in this case. I am a big fan of doing this type of research for even under construction ads. So for example, agency is producing a handful of spots. They're trying to decide among a few different potential creative avenues. It is a really great, and it's gotten a lot easier with some of our AI tools out there to create a bordermatic, animatic type of, not quite finished deliverable, but something that consumers can easily wrap their heads around. I'm a huge fan of, bringing in research like this earlier in the pipeline, right? Not necessarily testing a finished ad, but actually getting some, quick consumer input prior to, spending time and effort on hiring talent in, for some ads, getting into a lot of post-production and CGI and things that can, drive up those budgets, right? And the last component of this particular scorecard is going to be video dial testing. And that's basically just a playback of the video that has just been evaluated. And I don't know, I'm a child of the 80s, but I grew up with the Atari, and I had the controller that had the paddle, which I could dial back and forth. That's basically dial testing. If you've never experienced it or done it in person, it's actually something that used to be done and is still done a fair amount with in-person research. So you bring in, a group of people, sequester them, show them a video product, a movie trailer, a full, 30 minutes of a TV pilot, and you give them a handheld dial, which they dial to the left and they see something they dislike, dial to the right when they see something that they like. In this case, this is a digital variant of that, where folks are given a video, they have a slider that they can move to the right and left when they see something that they like or dislike within the ad. So this is the balance of you've got the evaluative measures, the survey based, and then you've got the diagnostic, which is going to be your dial testing, right? So if you're doing print ads, for example, obviously you can't do a dial test, but I like to try and work in some kind of diagnostic measure for those as well. It could be a heat mapping, it could be a highlighter tool for a print or a static image. In some cases, replace the dial test altogether. And a lot of brands like to do something more neuro in nature, maybe some eye tracking or some facial coding, just something to get at more of the frame by frame, right? And how should you use or how can you use something like a dial testing exercise? It is a great tool for if you are trying to identify maybe, and the idea is, and I'll show you some examples of this, but you have a video playback and you can watch the results of that dial testing exercise. You can watch the peaks and valleys of a line chart that as certain favorable things happen on screen, you'll see that line go up. When certain unfavorable things happen, you'll see that line go down. Great applications for that would be, if you are trying to I don't know, you've got a 60-second spot that you are tasked with trying to figure out what content is important for the 30-second variant or the 15. This is a great way to do it, right? When you see those dips, that's potentially area where you don't have to necessarily include in that, in that next version, as it were. In certain cases, you'll see, I've seen dial tests where, a certain character or talent appears on screen, and the moment they do, you see that dial dip. That could present a problem down the road. Dial test is a great gut check for, are there any offensive scenes in your video? Are there any things that you maybe didn't foresee when you were, creating the act, right? And then you'll see these thumbs ups and downs. And those are going to be indicators of normative improvements or declines. So we at Accelerant Research, we've done this recipe for testing ads hundreds and hundreds of times. So we have a database of norms for and benchmarks for ads that we've tested in the past. Whenever you do an ad test, so you go out and test a singular ad and you get a likability score of 81%. In a vacuum, without anything to compare to, that 81% means next to nothing, right? So it is always about being able to have some point of comparison so that you can tell what is good, what is bad. In this case, norms. In many cases, and I'm actually a big fan of actually not using a third-party norm like we might provide, but instead, as a company, if you're doing this type of research over and over again, to whatever extent you can start to standardize it and create your own norms, that's fantastic, right? Because, even these measures that we include in our sort of standard for doing this type of research, they're not applicable to every brand. There are some measures which may be a lot more appropriate to include. When you are doing this yourself, I often recommend customizing, right? Don't necessarily be beholden to a set of norms just because either you've tested it that way for years or because you've bought into, a company like ours that has their own recipe for norms. Again, if you're doing ad testing over and over again, it's best to create your own, honestly. Okay, so let's pretend that you're a Super Bowl advertiser. You have four brands that you have, you know, that you're running ads for, and you want to test all of them. So, how can we, as a standalone, we show just an individual scorecard. How well did it perform, plus or minus our norm? But, again, maybe you've got four ads delivered by the agency. You want to test them all and decide which should be your winners, which should be your losers, which ones, are warrant further development, which ones look like they may be, back to the drawing board, as it were, right? One pager, simple scorecard reporting can work really well. And so instead of, just like I said, showing the individual ad, you can show and compare a few simultaneously. In this case, you've got Nerds, Bud Light, Hellman's, and Mountain Dew compared to one another. Which ones scored better or worse than the others? So in many cases, you set out to do a bit of research. Maybe your goal is not really caring so much about what's happening within the rest of the universe or comparison to other ads that are being tested, but it's literally trying to make a decision among you got four ads to test. You're only going to take to production two or three of them. How do you prioritize? This is a great way to do that. Just quick comparison on those evaluative measures, and you're looking for significant differences, right? So which ones perform better or worse? Um, and we just, like I said, these are actual results from this year's Super Bowl ads. Uh, Interesting if we take a look at this, and this is something I was talking about with regard to some of those bottom of funnel metrics, but like intent, much higher for a Hellman's than for Nerds, Bud Light, Mountain Dew. That's not necessarily because the ad, the When Harry Met Sally, offshoot ad was that amazing. No, a lot of that is going to be by virtue of the product category that they exist within, right? Um, you know, Candy, beer, soda, a little bit different from, a competitive context, right? So whenever you're evaluating this type of research, you never just want to copy paste and push forward your results. You always want to take into consideration why things are happening, what they're all about, what it means, right? Okay, so of the ads that were tested this year, just if we take a look at our evaluative measures, who scored best, who scored worst, and what the balance of this presentation is really going to be is just kind of talking through a bunch of the examples and showing those of the ads, right? All right, so if we take brand recall, and that's again, did the ad, did folks actually take away which brand it was associated with? Who did it best? Who did it worst among the Super Bowl ads this year? Doritos, Ritz, Pringles, best, right? So they are among the highest brand association, and that's those the salty snacks did it this year, right? The brand recall, the brands that did so less goodly, um, would be OpenAI, ChatGPT. The Stop Hate, I believe it was. This was the Snoop Dogg Tom Brady ad. And then the Ray-Ban and Meta. These were among the lowest scores on that brand recall. But remember, we talked about context, right? For the Don't Hate, Stop Hate, I cannot remember the name of it exactly. Um, there was no real brand associated with it. So, if the ad didn't score well on that, well, there may be, reasons why, right? So that's why I say you always want to take into consideration, the context of what it is that you're evaluating. Don't just blindly, report results, but instead you need to know if you're doing well, if you're doing poorly, why that is, right? All right, so likability. Who did well, who did poorly? Likability, Lay's little girl planting her potato and watching it grow into a bag of potato chips really performed quite well in terms of just overall liking. Also, Budweiser and Clydesdales, as well as Booking.com and the Muppets. Not so great. There was the Coffee Mate. I don't know if y'all recall this one, and we'll show it in a few, but this was the traveling tongue ad. I don't know if you remember. There was the Tubi head shaped like a cowboy hat, not so great. And then there was Duncan, actually a really good and very well received ad last year. I guess we credit J-Lo for that, but this is, Duncan didn't do as great this year. Engagement. So this is, how likely would folks actually, tune in and view this thing? The strong performers, again, you're probably starting to see some patterns emerge, but you've got your Budweiser, you've got Lay's again, and you've got Michelob Ultra, pickleball hustlers. Not so great. Or again, the Coffee Mate. There was the DoorDash got trouble with your finances ad. I don't know if you remember this one. That one didn't do great when it came to engagement. Nor did the stock cold brew coffee, despite a dreamy Channing Tatum being part of it. They just couldn't overcome possibly the fact that it's European football being shown during American football. I don't know, but not so great from that standpoint. Viral potential. This is the one that is your tendency to share these ad results with others, post on your social, as it were, right? So this is getting a sense for, what kind of afterlife and potential, sharing and ongoing exposure and impressions might your ad have. Who did it best? Actually, the ad that wasn't an ad, AngelSoft, and this was through the roof with folks that were saying that they would share this on their socials. The ad itself didn't perform well on much else, but again, it was kind of an unconventional. Um, you got Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady again, high viral potential again. That one didn't have great awareness, but that wasn't, there wasn't the brand association, right? Again with the Budweiser Clydesdales. And again on the negative side, you've got the Coffee Mate not doing well. There was a Hims and Hers ad that wasn't as well received, or folks weren't as willing to share it virally. And again with the DoorDash. So a bunch of examples here, a bunch that I'm going to kind of continue to share out. Um, and this is kind of, the illustration of, that dial test in action, how it performs, right? This was the Hellmans when Harry met Sally. This was a really well-received one. Like I said, this was a 60-minute spot, and I wanted to kind of highlight the dial testing because you see, a bit of a dip in this as you get into the second 30 seconds of the ad. Um, Probably could cut that down to your 30-second or your 15-second spot, and you wouldn't lose a whole lot of the content, right? You do see a big jump at the end of the ad when Sydney Sweeney comes on and says, gives the iconic line of "I'll have what she's having." Um, but this was, generally a very well received ad, right? No Reason to Hate was the name of this one. And this was Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady. Again, the recall numbers not so great, but it was impactful, right? It had strong likability engagement. Now, when you get into some of these, again, you take a concept like this, which is just be nice to one another. There's not necessarily a brand to purchase or use. There's not a likelihood to recommend. Sure, I can do that, but you always want to think about, all right, what's your product category? Who is your target audience? Are these measures appropriate or applicable? If they're not, you want to maybe really start thinking about doing something more custom in nature, right? This was the Meta and Ray-Ban. I think you had, uh, yeah, the evaluation of the Meta glasses, right? This one kind of didn't hit the mark quite as much. And the brand recall for this one was low. And that's not uncommon when you see these kind of paired up or collab type of brand assessments. It's hard to know, is this a Meta product? Is this a Ray-Ban product? Who is the appropriate sponsor of this thing, as it were, right? Um, I think we have another example here of that actually where we had a bunch of brands coming together. This was the Instacart, I believe, where it was actually done quite well and very well received. So, not as powerful connotation with regard to Meta, definitely so with regard to the Instacart. So there was the battle this year for the traveling facial hair. I don't know if you all recall this, but we had Pringles and we also had Little Caesars, where in this case Pringles, you got the mustaches being ripped off of people's faces and flying through the air. Little Caesars, I can go to that one. You got kind of the same deal, but in this case, it's the eyebrows. Both really strongly received ads. I think Little Caesars has the edge in terms of which one won. Um, and then if you get into the following ad, and that would be your coffee mate. So appropriate for eyebrows, appropriate for mustaches. When it gets into the tongue, coming out of the mouth, people are not so keen on that, right? So, pretty poor ratings with regard to some of your likability, engagement, kind of across the board, as it were, right? And you know, you're spending this much on an ad, you're definitely wanting something on the more favorable side, I will say. However, that's not always the case or the intent. I remember GoDaddy a few years ago did a Super Bowl spot where it was supermodels and average Joes making out, and people were very kind of disgusted by the ad. There are other ads that, negative impression, but in some cases, that's kind of the intent of the ad, right? Um, Now, I recall there's a toenail fungus ad where the character it was very creepy and it always made your skin crawl, but it's a memorable ad, so is it doing the job, right? B2B ads. Super Bowl, mass audience. Most of your B2B, uh, you'll see, for example, I think we're looking at GoDaddy here. Tendency and the trend is for these to not perform quite as well versus consumer products, right? And this is again where if you are a B2B brand and you are, and you could argue that, like a GoDaddy or I believe Squarespace was another one that we tested, didn't do so well, honestly, Squarespace. Um, but if you're, targeting small businesses, for example, well, if you're doing a Gen Pop kind of general consumer ad like a Super Bowl, uh, small business make up, depending on your definition, as much as, 15-20% of the general population. So, it's not a crazy targeting. But when you're comparing an ad targeted to small businesses to, cookies or chips, well, that's going to be very difficult for those to measure up. So when you're doing normative comparisons, you always want to kind of keep that context in mind. Keep in mind what you're comparing against, who you're up against, and not hang your hat on or feel too discouraged by if you are a niche type product, and you're comparing to these very general market. This was another one of the really big winners, and that was your Budweiser Clydesdale. Horse walks into a bar. Um, this is they've been doing variants of this spot for years and years, and it continues to have that impact. Another one that was really well received, that was your Michelob Ultra. Uh, this was the Pickleball Hustlers. Um, Really well received ad, very favorable in terms of recall, likability, engagement, viral potential. Mentioned this one. This was the Hims and Hers weight loss ad. This one's a good to highlight just because of the bottom of funnel, right? Again, this one didn't do poorly per se, except on likability. And a lot of that comes from, this some pretty strong imagery that's used, especially in the first end of this ad. Um, but performing at norm is not the worst thing in the world for a given ad, right? Performing poorly is something that you certainly want to avoid. But again, for a brand like Hims and Hers, again, these norms are going to be compared against batteries or snack food. A product that requires potential injections or heavy side effects. Obviously, that's going to be really difficult to measure up when it comes to some of these more call to action measures like likelihood to use or purchase, like recommendation, all those good things. Another one that really missed the mark this year, and this was the DoorDash. Let's talk about your finances. Just just didn't resonate. I think that was all of the ads. Questions? Let's get into them. I can see that some folks have been chatting, have been talking throughout. Would love to see if you guys have any questions. Again, comments, definitely bring them on. More than happy to talk through some of these, debate about some of them. So let's go for poll results first, though. So pretty even split. It looks like about 25% of folks thought Budweiser, Michelob Ultra, Hellman's were the winners. Guess what? Depends, right? Depends on which measure you're looking at or talking about. And in fact, if you're a young researcher, this is your answer to every question that you're ever asked about research, and that is, it depends. What was the intent of your campaign? Are you awareness building? Are you trying to really move the needle on something like consideration? The answers to some of those questions is going to vary and is going to, drive to what extent your ad is successful or a failure. Do you produce high performing ads over and over and over again? And does one variant come out and it's performing below your standard, right? Colleen is asking a question, and I'll go ahead and address that. And that's, do you look at the why behind these numbers? Did those that elicited humor and nostalgia perform better than those that elicited disgust or discomfort? In this case, for this year, not so much. But that is, and I will say that, what we're sharing is very scorecardy in nature, right? Meant to just prop up and build those norms. But that, getting behind the what that we're, just pushing out in the scorecard is absolutely what you should be and what we should all be exploring as researchers. So if you're standing up a program like this in your organization, that is the thing you want to understand to whatever extent possible, right? So are there certain themes that you see over time? The more and more of this research you do, the more you can start to assess these kinds of things. So humor, nostalgia, tugging at the heartstrings, are these things that tend to resonate versus others? Similarly, again, from Colleen, this is how did your results vary by demographics or psychographics? Something not mentioned, but I think it's very, very important about this is to do exactly that. So everything that we've reported on is just Gen Pop, census balanced demographics, right? But in every survey you should be, and we are capturing demographic information, capturing some brand usage, some category usage, some psychographics. This is information that you can then use to compare and contrast, slice and dice your data. Maybe you have 4 ads that you're looking to roll out. You've got one among them that isn't a very strong performer among Gen Pop, but if you dig into some of your subgroups, maybe you notice that I don't know, a particular ad is really well received among folks who have Hulu subscriptions, for example, right? That could be a really compelling reason why, especially if you're doing your media mix, trying to basically place that ad that maybe wasn't as high a performer as the others from an overall standpoint. How much is it doing better, and is it something that we can place, in a more targeted fashion, right? Caleb asked about the Open AI ad results. This was the Chat GPT. I don't think we have a scorecard in this particular presentation, but it didn't perform great. It was among the lowest in several of the measures that we look at. In fact, the brand association wasn't there, and that could be by virtue of is it OpenAI, is it ChatGPT, what is it, right? Matt Roberts is posting that the Philadelphia chapter of the AMA holds an annual smackdown of advertisers' use of the Super Bowl event as platforms to leverage reach and engage with target audiences. That's on the board. And we'll want to pull some of these metrics into their convention. Ah, sweet. Yeah, go for it. Please do. Everybody, yeah. I mean, we post these results on YouTube. Um, they're open and available for anybody to go in and access. The ads that we test, I mean, these are Super Bowl ads. These are, published by the advertisers on YouTube, so all public domain. Do you have any other comments, questions coming in? It's about wrapping this up. What kind of time we got? Got a few minutes. If there are any final questions, definitely feel free to drop them. Otherwise, we're going to be posting this archived video for folks to access as they wish. Um, and we're going to be posting again the slides for folks to access and download as they wish. Otherwise, appreciate y'all attending. Definitely answer or connect with one another. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, definitely register for our next webinar is coming up, and we appreciate it, y'all.